Dwayne, you just surveyed 661 churches across America. You studied 6 million donations and $18 billion worth of giving. Why should a pastor want to listen to this episode?
Because it's real data that we can identify 9 unique takeaways with 5 missed opportunities that if the church implements will transform their givers.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Kira.
And I'm Dan.
And we're your hosts for Distilled Church Finance Made Simple. Today, we're going to talk about what studying $18 billion in donations revealed about the modern giver.
Well, yeah, I'm really excited for today's episode. We're going to be sitting down with Dwayne from Mortarstone. Mortarstone is a software and an organization that helps with donor data and make that visible so that you can understand what's happening with your donors. And so they just did a massive study to look back at all the donations that have been made. And they've had data for the last 3 years that they're comparing to. And so we're going to just dive into some of the highlights from that, but really good findings for you and your church on practical things that you need to be thinking about when it comes to the modern giver. And let's get started. But Dwayne, before we jump in, I want to ask you a question. We just finished the Olympics. And so if you had to go and participate in the Olympics, which event would you pick to be part of?
Well, I have to say, Dan, much easier question than I anticipated you to ask, but and it's great to be back with you today. But I got to say, curling would be my answer. I think I've fallen in love with curling, and I think the teamwork that I see and just you have to think through the angles is just a beautiful thing. And Kira, you're laughing at me, so I don't know what to make of that.
I'm picturing them like shuffling down with like their little, it's so good. Yep.
I don't know what it is about curling, but I get so excited and enamored by curling each Olympics. I think it goes back to a few years ago when we had the kind of the miracle run with our team. And I think we won gold. And yeah, that was really exciting. So yeah, that would be high on my list as well. And athletically, well, I'm sure I would be very bad at curling. It feels like the best one I could possibly even try to compete at compared to a lot of these other ones. So maybe and probably least likely to get hurt
The
at.
barrier to entry seems low, being able to spin it just right and to get anyway, I think I would fail at it, but it looks really fun.
I'm just going to say it does kind of look like in order to be the one who like shoves the rock out there, you do have to kind of know how to do the splits. So maybe start practicing that now, gentlemen.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll find a different sport.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I'm beyond that. So maybe not. Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's kick this off. Dwayne,
Yeah,
I'd be
let's
so
go.
curious to know what's different about your report than many of the others that we see out there.
So, Kira, great question. And I think just real quick, because I know there's a lot of other stuff for us to get to, but for us, it's actual data that we are leveraging. And so you talked about the $1 billion of giving. That's actual real hard numbers. And we know the names of the givers. We know the amount of the givers. We're not going to share it, but we know all that stuff. And so it's real hard data. Everyone else that we know of does survey data. And so the halo effects associated with survey data is extreme. And so what we know is our data is real.
Let's start with overall giving trends. What did you find regarding giving and donor trends?
So one of the things that we saw was the fact of so this is our third time that we've done this report. So we've done it 3 years straight. This is the first year that giving in the church has outpaced inflation. So think about it, for the first time in 3 years, and each year looked at 4 years trend, actually the church lost money compared to inflation and to expenses. And this year we saw that change, which is really exciting from that standpoint. But another thing that we saw was the number of donors, the number of people contributing has gone up. But I think the challenge is even with that, we've seen the median dollars given has actually gone down. And so the good news is the numbers are up and the giving's up, but the median amount of giving is going down, which really tells us the fact that we've got a lot of young givers, and young meaning early givers, and they're not giving at the level yet. And so the key question is how will the discipleship take place that will move them from entry level givers to consistent givers to being strong givers?
Yeah, it's interesting, Dwayne, because we were kind of talking about this a couple weeks ago and even a little bit before we recorded here. On one hand, we're seeing more and more givers like you're talking about. And we kind of talked about, hey, something's shifting in the church. The church is maybe talking about giving more, and there's maybe efforts by organizations like both of ours who have even encouraged pastors to be more intentional in that. And that was maybe an opportunity that pastors have taken. And now it seems like, okay, now the next opportunity is how do we actually develop donors, and how are we specific in our discipleship in what it means to be a steward and to be generous, not just to the church, but as a way of living as a believer.
Recognizing that the number of new young givers is increasing faster than old givers are dropping out. The key is the fact that it still takes 10 Gen Zs to replace one boomer's giving. It takes 3.4 millennials to replace one boomer's giving. And so we have to step into where they're at and help them grow into becoming stronger givers. And indications are it's moving in that direction. But if we don't step in and help them, no one's guided most of them in how to give in their lives.
And it kind of makes me want, I think when I was first starting on staff as executive pastor at my church, like I kind of remember the statistics almost being for the previous generation, like 10 millennials you need to replace, and so it's like as people age, they're able to give more, but it's not just going to happen naturally. Like there has to be an intentional process to help people develop. And so we're facing some of the same challenges, but the people before us and generations before us in the church have figured out how to disciple people and to be able to encourage them in their generosity and stewardship.
Yep. No, I think that's spot on.
What were a couple of the most interesting findings from the annual report?
So one of them was the fact of we actually saw the increase in end of year giving actually starts in November now more than it did in previous years. We always saw most of the giving taking place in December. Between 2022 and 2025, we saw a 38% increase in the amount of giving that takes place in November, which is significant because one of the things that we know and we talk quite a bit about, and actually we talked end of year giving strategies last time we were together, Dan, was the fact that giving large gifts actually takes time to prepare. And so the more that you can move those conversations into October and November is good news, because transactions that include land or major stock gifts or whatever probably is going to take more time. And so that we're seeing that now taking place in November is actually pretty exciting to us, because it's something we've talked about for quite a while. One of the things also was the fact that the growing dependence on top givers. And so one of the things that we saw this year is that the top 1% gave 21% of the giving to a church. The top 10% gave 61% of giving to the church. And one of the other stats is the fact that the top 1% of the givers increased their giving to a church 45% over the 4 years. And so your best givers continue to give more, but that also it's kind of, if I think about a basketball team, if you're dependent upon one key player, if they're taken out of the game, the likelihood that you're going to continue to do well is a significant challenge. And I've talked to multiple churches where one giver moves and their budget is lost because of dependency on top givers. Just continue to think through how to build up and expand the giver base, and not just focus on discipling well the best givers, but discipling all givers, I think is one of those things that is an interesting trend.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're saying there too, because there's the practical side of that in church health and your budget and your finance, but there's also like, if you're a coach of a basketball team and you are like, well, we have this one, like either you could neglect developing your team because you're like, well, we're winning because we have one really good player, or you could just focus your energy on that one good player. But like as a true coach, you should be pouring into each member of that basketball team, trying to make them better. And same as what we're called as pastors and shepherds is to really disciple our people in generosity. Jesus talked about finances all the time. He made direct connections between finances and a person's heart. And so this is not just a conversation for how to fund the church, but it's also our responsibility as shepherds of how we are shepherding our congregation. And so these are indicators of how that's happening in the church. And so there's both sides of this. And I know your heart towards it. And it's worth saying, because it's not just a funding mechanism. This is real discipleship through what we see in finances.
Dan, I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the things and I was talking to a church earlier today, and the thing I know is my Heavenly Father, our Heavenly Father, is the most generous being in the universe. And I'm called to become more like Him and to call others to be more like Him, which means we have to grow in our generosity so that we actually reflect the Father. And so that's the heartbeat of this conversation for me, and I know for you as well. And what we're about at Mortarstone is helping people grow in their generosity to reflect the Father.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Dwayne, thanks for joining us. Give it to me straight. What is one takeaway or action item that every pastor needs to take from this episode?
So recognizing that we identified 9 key takeaways in our report, and we had 5 missed opportunities that we believe is taking place in the church today. And the thing I would say, Dan, is go download the report. And I know we've got the link in the show notes. And so I encourage you to go do that. If you're a data geek like me and you want to go dig deeper, we at Mortarstone did a webinar, a whole hour of digging into the data and talking about it that you could go watch as well. But I think what I would recommend is everybody download the report, look at the missed opportunities, and take one step towards moving people closer to reflecting Christ.
I love that. That's great. Well, Dwayne, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing this information and this report with us. I think it makes all of us better in the church space. So thank you so much.
If you out there are curious to learn more about Mortarstone or check out that report, head on over to churchfinancemadesimple.com. Again, that's churchfinancemadesimple.com, and you'll find more resources there. We'll catch you next time.